Good morning. As mentioned, I'm from Telos Corporation, and just a couple of words about Telos. We, for the past 25 years, have been providing cybersecurity solutions and services to some of the most security-conscious organizations in the world. And our work has been evidenced by numerous awards and recognitions, two of which I'll just call out. The Cybersecurity 500, which is a global compilation of the top leading cybersecurity firms in the world. Telos enters that ranking at number 25, which is exciting, and number 2 in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Also, we've been awarded the James Cogswell Achievement Award. Of 13,000 companies that are eligible for that award, less than 1% receive it. So we're super proud of the recognition we've gotten, and invite you to visit us either at our booth or at telos.com for more information on that. All right, so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists for today, the first panel on cybersecurity growth companies. So first is John Ackerly, CEO and co-founder of Virtru, a provider of business privacy and data protection to more than 5,000 organizations around the world. A longtime privacy advocate, he was responsible for technology policy at the White House and was the policy and strategic planning director at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Welcome, John. All right, second we have Rohit Milani, is co-founder and CEO of PhishMe, a provider of human phishing defense solutions. He has led the company's growth from concept to a company of over 400 employees, serving half of the Fortune 100. PhishMe has become a global leader in phishing defense and secured $60 million in equity capital from reputed investors. Welcome, Rohit. Okay, Jack Huffard is president, COO, and co-founder of Tenable, a pioneer of cyber exposure, an emerging discipline for managing and measuring the modern attack surface to accurately understand and reduce cyber risk. Together with Tenable's co-founders, he received the 2013 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year for Defense and Security. Welcome, Jack. Next, we have Tiffany Jones. Tiffany is CEO of Distil Networks, a leader of bot detection and mitigation. She previously served in government as Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House Office of Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Protection, where she contributed to the development of the President's national strategy to secure cyberspace. Welcome, Tiffany. And our moderator for today's panel is Mark Frantz, co-founder of BlueDelta Capital Partners, a growth capital firm focused on the U.S. federal government technology marketplace. All right.
Thank you very much.
Mark, over to you.
Morning, everybody. As you can see, we're a caffeinated panel up here, so we're going to dive right in. That and Terrence made me swear we'd stay on time this year, so I'm going to get right to it. As you can see, we have 4 great growth companies in the area, which helps define us as one of the cybersecurity leaders in the world. These are 4 companies at various stages, and what we were hoping to achieve in this panel is give you guys some insights and perspectives on how these companies got started, how they've grown, and where they're headed, and what is unique about that within this region. So what I'm going to ask is each of you to talk about why you either started the company and or agreed to be CEO. And Jack, if I may pick on you first to lead us off.
Sure, thanks, Mark. So I originally came from the threat space. The company Tenable is built on what is known as vulnerability management. It's giving the ability to look at your network, understand what's on the network and what state it's in. Started the company with a gentleman, Ron Gula, who was ex-NSA, who had built a threat product. And another gentleman from France, Renaud Darrison, who wrote a very popular open source technology called Nessus, which is still used today by a lot of practitioners in the world. And I think the reason we started the company was that I'd met 2 really incredible practitioners of security that knew both the offensive and defensive side of attacking a network or understanding where it was vulnerable. And at the time, we founded it in 2002, so we're a 15-year-old startup. there was not a lot of great ability to assess networks, and we felt like there was a better way to do it over time. And so we developed a way to do vulnerability management continuously. And I'll talk about it more as the day progresses, but that's why we started the company.
Great. John, Rohit, one of you guys want to take the next one?
So for me, so then leaving to the side that my co-founder is my brother, and happy to go into
We'll come back to
the
that.
trials and awesome so components of then running a family business in the technology sector. Really, it was the mission. So Will spent 10 years at the NSA, and I was the technology policy advisor at the White House, pre and post. So then 9/11, actually, 7:30 a.m. on September 11th, I was briefing the deputy chief of staff about a meeting we were going to have in the Oval Office around data privacy and our position around opt-in versus opt-out for individuals to be able to have control over whether their data is resold online. And so we were going very aggressively in a pro-consumer way. Obviously, the world changed about 2 hours later, and I was also in the room as the Patriot Act so then moved through. Will saw other interesting things happening at the NSA, and really data privacy being the animating mission for us really started very early. Fast forward almost 10 years, and I was so then brought over to the dark side in a private equity up in New York, which was awesome. Very happy there. And then Will was talking to me about some really interesting technology that made encryption not suck, really making it easy for the end user. And in this case, it was how do you exchange data in the intelligence world. We thought, man, if you can really integrate into the tools that matter to people, there was a really important privacy imperative here. So we both left our jobs. One big lesson, which I'll get into later, is don't follow the advice of investors who both told us not to leave our jobs. One of them is now an investor in our business, but really fundamentally it was the mission and really having that long-term view that if we stayed at it, we could do something special.
Rohit?
All right. So yeah, I founded PhishMe along with my co-founder Aaron Higby, who I've known my entire career. I would say the initial catalyst was two brash 20-something-year-olds before we started PhishMe, another company that we had started, and said, hey, let's do something ourselves. This kind of sounds like a flaky reason, right? But we were both incident responders for years. I was employee number 4 at Mandiant back in the day when it wasn't called Mandiant. Used to spend my time in Kevin Mandia's attic sleeping on a yoga mat back in those days. And just over the years, even in the early 2000s, watching spear phishing being the vector of choice for attackers, I was sort of sick of hearing security people say, the human's the weakest link. It was sort of with this tone of, I've given up on the human. What can we do with technology? And Aaron and I, while geeks at heart, thought, wow, this is ripe for disruption here. Let's think about how we can actually address the human element, not just to be less susceptible, but like in other domains in physical security, leverage smart humans to be informants for your security team. So sort of an intelligence law enforcement model of spraying out your informants mixed in the crowd. So that was really the motivation for us to get started, was to turn the model of humans, the weakest link, on its head, turn them into an asset, and address what was, in our opinion, and continues to be the #1 attack vector, which is targeted phishing attacks.
And Tiffany, you're the new CEO on the panel, so what got you to do this?
Well, so I had been following government. I went to Symantec for 10 years, then to a startup called Eyesight Partners, where I became the chief revenue officer, and just really enjoyed the startup environment. Loved the agility, loved the ability to control our own destiny, and have real impact on mission, right, for our customers. It was a cyber threat intelligence company. We were acquired by FireEye in January of 2016, and I went over running global strategic alliances.
You both can share Kevin Mandia's stories?
Yeah, exactly. Although I didn't sleep on his yoga mat. I just,
For that.
yeah. So I enjoyed my time at FireEye running alliances, but I was really itching to get back to a startup environment. So I began to have conversations and explore, options. I really felt strongly about staying here in the area and being a part of the tech community here. But I also wanted to go to a market-leading company, not just another Me Too endpoint security or another Me Too, SIM company. I was looking for a place that was still market-leading in its space with lots of opportunity to really scale and grow the go-to-market engine for an organization, and that's when I found Distil. They're market-leading in the botnet mitigation space. A really amazing team of people, and we have the opportunity to really kind of disrupt the market.
So let me go in reverse order then, because you just said something I know we wanted to cover, which is how you think about go-to-market, and especially at the various stages of the company's development. Can you start peeling back that for everybody?
Yeah, sure. So this company is not, early stage. We're going through kind of an extension of our C round right now, at about 15 million in ARR. Already with an established sales and marketing function. But what is, as I'm thinking about 2018, I'm putting in place a lot more structure and process. There was still a lot of ad hoc, things being done, which is normal for a startup environment, especially as it's evolving and transitioning and maturing. And so I was really, I think, brought in by the board and then CEO to really help kind of take the company to the next level and scale it. And that includes really formulating a more comprehensive corporate strategy and go-to-market plan. And so I utilize actually a specific methodology that I've used in the last several companies that I learned through John Thompson at Symantec. And team that's really served me well as a waterfall framework for, really looking strategically at the market landscape, looking at, what are the customers we actually want to service? What are their unmet and underserved needs and requirements? What are the offerings then that we can satisfy to meet those needs? And then looking at the functions and the organization and people necessary to do the job. A lot of companies make the mistake as they scale of going in reverse order. And what they do is they focus on organization and people first. And that's only, supposed to be done after you've actually figured out, what you want to be when you grow up and how you want to orient yourselves to the market and what market segments you want to go after and what geos across which verticals, et cetera, et cetera. That's when you then take the time to build the right functions and teams to go out and execute.
Roger that. You can tell Tiffany has a slight passion for this topic. Rohit, at 400 plus people, how do you guys, now that you're worldwide and a market leader, think about go-to-market?
Yeah, very differently than we thought about 6 or 7 years ago. I can tell you that. When we first started as a software subscription business, it's quite different from the yesteryears of when you had a perpetual model to your business and you extracted long-term value from the customer up front. Now you need to focus on retention and essentially you're financing your customer's purchase because you're getting your fees paid annually. So the concept of having to front load the customer acquisition cost in the early days, what we realized is, look, if we believe obviously we have superior technology, if we can take this out and just grab market share in the early days, we definitely followed the first 3 years of the company growth at any cost was the model. We just carpet bombed marketing events. We just, that was it. The model was we're just going to take over the market. But you have to be very cognizant of keeping an eye on, obviously, the cash, but also unit economics. So in the early days, it was much more focused on the unit economics, knowing that we are going to be burning through cash, but keeping an eye on unit economics like customer acquisition cost, our long-term value extraction from customers, our retention metrics, gross margins, all of those good things. And as we saw that model evolve and scale, obviously we had to turn the dial on, and to Tiffany's point on growing up a little bit and say, now it's not growth at any cost. You're out of the teenage years. You don't get to use your parents' money anymore. And you start dialing it towards, well, it's not just unit economics, but it's also the profitability, and you have to have an eye on that. We've seen way too many companies even hit the public markets with sort of no concept or a near-term horizon towards profitability and being hurt hard. So, today where PhishMe is, we're north of 70 million ARR, and what we're really looking at is, okay, it's hyper growth still, but how do we balance that growth with a model of profitability in the very short term?
One of the things we're going to cover later is funding and how you think about growing a company, and we've had some good discussions on that. Let me turn to John, who I'm pretty sure doesn't have a third brother who does go-to-market. So how do you guys think about it?
So I feel like we are birds of a feather, Rohit, because from really taking a different angle on the human first component and how that translates into business model is something we've thought a lot about at Virtru, because we really started as a consumer first play, always with the idea that the monetization happens in the enterprise. So what does that really mean, and how does that translate into go-to-market for us? It is, you better get the user experience right. We are almost as much a user experience company as we are a security company, so that you can actually execute, land, and expand. So as opposed to all the brain damage of the 18-month sales cycles, talking to the CISO, having evangelists within organizations using our free software, but then being really clear-eyed about what that monetization path is. So you can download our software 5 seconds and you have secure email, that's great, but how do you monetize that? So being very really cognizant of the economics of the freemium model being difficult, and making sure that at the right time we have an enterprise team ready to go in, and with the proof points already internally, being able to drive enterprise-wide sales, and that's what we're seeing today. We've about 7,000 customers. Largest deployment is 100,000 people. It took a lot of work to kind of get from those early stages, lots of bumps. So then along the road, Mark has seen that firsthand. But just being really clear-eyed about what the end state is, and making those investments up front and burning the cash up front, so that you can get the ecosystem going. It's very important.
Jack, you're the mature one here, who's a market leader at well over 9 figures in revenue. Can you bring us home how you guys have evolved and how you currently look at go-to-market?
Sure. I'm going to take it back to the very beginning, because I think it's important for those that are aspiring to hang out the shingle, that you really focus on, you look at the customer back and you understand exactly what job you're trying to accomplish for them. And when you think about go-to-market, I believe that as a founder or a co-founder, you have to sell it until you can't sell it anymore. Before you go out and hire your first salesperson. I really believe you've got to get out and talk to the customers. You learn so much from them. I did this for almost 2 years, and we did hire a salesperson or two in the meantime, but a lot of our initial time was spent on the technology. We'd go out and sell it to a customer. Our first customer was Johns Hopkins, and then our second was NASA Goddard. And from both of those perspectives, we learned so much about what was missing, and the roadmaps were developed from there. We also tested out this continuous idea, which years ago it was more, you watched networks from a threat perspective continuously, but you didn't do it from a vulnerability management perspective, and that was something that we were testing with the market. It's not until just recently that we have that continuous monitoring from a vulnerability perspective has come into being something that people really believe in, and that it's really shifted from a threat to a kind of a vulnerability-based view of knowing what's on your network at any time. So as you think about moving from startup to profitability or moving up into growth, you have to pick your segments. You cannot kind of peanut butter your things. We focused on the federal marketplace because of some of our success at NASA. And we also focused in the commercial space. And it ended up that about 10% of our sales were to the Fed, and 90% were to the commercial enterprise. And we started to build out teams that way, but they were all in one, and over time you have to break them out into different segments. And then if you're in technology and you can put it on the web to be downloaded or accessed, the international markets are very open. It's a kind of a digital world today. And thinking about how you enter those markets is a different activity as well. And especially as a first-time entrepreneur, and we were just talking about this over there, it's just going international it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of perseverance, and you may have to start it over once or twice. Depends on the partners you enter. But we believe long-term that we're serving the large enterprise and kind of middle market, and we believe that's best served through partners. So we're 100% indirect. We sell through partnerships, resellers and systems integrators. And those, we believe, are going to be strategic partners to our customers. And that's how we thought about it and how we're trying to invest.
So let me pull on that string about those different stages and going to market overseas, and talk about what makes you differentiated as you go into new markets. Rohit, I'm not going to forget that one anytime soon, about the carpet bombing. As you have tightened the focus, let me start with you. How do you think you have keyed on your differentiation in the marketplace, especially as you go into either new verticals or new regions, as Jack was just talking about?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. Let me see if I can answer this politically correctly.
The reporters in the room won't write this down if he doesn't, right? Okay.
Well, a couple of things. I always joke with people. I said, if you start on the west coast of the United States and if the x-axis is geography going eastward and the y-axis is your sales cycle, there's an exponential increase starting from the west coast of the US on your way to Japan. And it truly plays out. We have salespeople on the West Coast that sell and get purchase orders while they're meeting a customer at a Guitar Center. I'm not exaggerating, and doing things they shouldn't be. The East Coast gets a little more, I think, sensible, and then you start getting the sensible turning into painful as you head into Europe and the Middle East and Asia Pacific. So it's kind of interesting, as to Jack's point. I think when you do decide to go into an international geography after having studied, what are the verticals? So for us, it's been, what worked in the US? Does this translate to those markets? What are the sales cycles we can expect here? But you have to have that perseverance, just because, most of the rest of the world does not move at the pace of the US. And so it takes quite a bit of perseverance, and it's easy to get frustrated and just back it up. I think while we've looked at all of that, it just, as pipelines developed and focusing on, as I said, the unit economics in the early deals was kind of the focus, saying, okay, this can work. It's worthy of additional investments. From our standpoint, it was a relatively simple overall ideology. We kind of looked at what were the hot spots in terms of developed nations that were English speaking and were being targeted by the same actors via phishing. The problem existed, we knew that, we had a solution, so it was just a matter of figuring out the go-to-market specific to the region. I think to Jack's point, what we learned over time is, yes, you can get started with the direct model just enough to build the market and get channel excited, but really, especially outside the US, leveraging the channel, whether it's MSSPs, it's VARs, distribution partners, is quite key. You're just not going to get the reach and the cultural fit without that. So that's sort of the model we followed, and I'll come back to so developed nations, phishing's a problem, let's go west to east and keep our sales cycle pain lower. So we went to the UK next, and from there on, we went to the Middle East and then into Asia Pacific.
John?
So then you are much more disciplined than I am, because I really tried to keep
still in the
those
carpet
kind
bombing
of
phase.
frameworks, and somehow we ended up in Japan. Definitely long sales cycles, super critical that we have a channel partner there. Right now, though, we are going through the hard work of making them actually productive, which is why we found that direct sales to start is important, so you can actually, we have found so far channel is a lot of paper, at the end of the day, it is on their paper, but we're doing the work. So, TBD channel for us, we think has a ton of potential, but it's slow. And as an earlier stage business, you really, I think, need to have that direct motion to then understand the customer and then get the channel going. But from an international perspective, It's been interesting. So we do, it was a couple of strategic accounts in core markets where data privacy was an issue. So for some reason, we have a lot of fans in France. Who would have thunk it? And we think actually Europe's going to be a bigger market for us than in the U.S. over time. But it's been really ad hoc to start, and it's, you get one or two anchor accounts. The national global telecom in the Philippines did an enterprise-wide deployment for us, and lo plus behold, there's an ecosystem building around that because people send sensitive content via email. So we'll see. I think we should follow up so I can understand your model of going west to east, and we need to get a West Coast team in place right away. But it's been really interesting. I don't have a great answer, but you have to be flexible, I think, at our stage.
Tiffany, both in your experience in your past jobs and here, how do you think about differentiation in terms of breaking into new markets and new verticals?
Well, I think I completely agree with Rohit on that. In every company I've ever worked in, it's like you got to land, and build, key anchor clients, typically in the U.S. and from there. And I think some of that also depends, by the way, on the technology and what you're selling to customers. So I put that caveat in there. For us, that's what it has been. Although now a third of our business is actually coming out of EMEA. With the help of an investment of a team that we placed there, primarily sales, some support, a solution architect, but currently have no APJ presence, although we've done a few deals in the Asia Pacific region and in Singapore and Japan in particular. So I'm actually looking at making some investments there, an investment in an account team dedicated to government, another space that we really haven't focused on and we're excited about. And part of this is the result of the market coming along. Like we were an early, first mover in this market segment of botnet mitigation. And now that there's more awareness and understanding of the problem set, there is more of an appetite, right, and budget and resources to, want our solution. So there's part of that too to take into consideration. The last piece I'll say, because I care so much about it, is on the topic of partners and channel in particular. And, it's important for all of us to think about as, a go-to-market plan and where you're going and what market segments you're going after, whether it's large enterprise or mid-market or the SMB space, et cetera, determines, also what partners you want to engage with and partner with. Not all partners are created equal. And it's important to think about different categories of partners, first of all. If you're selling technology widgets, typically, you're also looking for potentially fulfillment, right? And that's where traditional kind of VARs, LARs, DISTIs have traditionally come into play, although there are some tremendous value-added resellers and others that do far more than just fulfillment work. You've got your systems integrators and consultancies that are doing amazing work on site with customers day to day, and in many cases are seen as the customer, right? And are building out entire kind of solutions and systems for customers. And so they matter greatly depending on your go-to-market plan. You've got the likes of, quite frankly, other technology vendors where there's opportunity potentially to OEM your own capability and integrate it into theirs to go to market, which is something that we're considering with certain technology vendors at this point. And then service providers, right? Increasingly more customers are moving to outsourcing their services due to the vacuum of talent, right? The lack of talent in security and security operations, among other things, and cost. So with service providers, right, that are now delivering a set of services for a customer or on behalf of a customer, that category of partners also matters. So, we struck a pretty strategic deal in the last year with Verizon, VDMS, where, we're integrating our botnet mitigation capability alongside theirs, right? And other CDNs. So that's another example of kind of category of partner. And it's important to think about those things very distinctly and very differently.
We'll have to come back and ask how you keep everybody happy in your partner ecosystem. But I want to shift, because you just hit something that I know we all talked about earlier, and bring it home a little bit. And Jack, if I could ask you, as the cornerstone in the industry right now, to talk about regionally what you think are the pros and the cons of this as a cyber arena. And to your point, Tiffany, about talent, I saw a news piece this morning that the backlog on cleared IT professionals now in this area, both within commercial cyber and government cyber, and writ large around some cloud stuff, is now almost 750,000 people. So in terms of talent, in terms of building a company, in terms of the ecosystem infrastructure, could each of you, starting with you, Jack, over your 15 years, talk about the pros and cons of the region, and to the degree you're willing to offer some advice and counsel about what should be done or not be done for those public policymakers in the room or who read a press story later? Feel free to throw one out there.
Okay, so I'm going to be somewhat provocative on this. I really believe that we should consider our region just like we have with our companies, a startup. And we've had some successes in the region. We've had Mandiant that's come out of here. We've had SourceFire. We've had other companies. What those do is spin off people that create additional companies. So I think we have to have a little bit of patience for this region to gather speed. But I do believe it's being recognized in the country as an area that is deep in cybersecurity expertise, but maybe not as deep in product marketing, product management, go-to-market, that area. But you know what? We're moving people from around the country here to join our business. We've got great CEOs around on this panel and others that are out here. I also think that the state governments here, Maryland, Virginia, compete too much with each other, and they need to collaborate. Because if we want this region, we could go from New York south or Boston south to here, and it is the same distance as the entire state of California. And if you want to know who's leading in cybersecurity, CB Insights is a group that does a lot of research here. 65% of the private cybersecurity companies in the world are in the US. Half of those are in Silicon Valley. Only 8% are in Virginia and 7% are in Maryland. So we're not there yet. But I know that we can get there, and I think that we've just got to continue to build companies here and move people here. The density of customer base is just, it's amazing on the
World's largest technology marketplace in the backyard.
So I'm gonna let other folks speak, but I'm...
John, Rohit?
So I think that opportunity in terms of the world's largest customer base is also the part of the risk here, because I think a lot of, so for us, the biggest strength is, out of the gate, it was my brother and 4 of his team coming out of a Fort Meade incredible, encryption and a cyber expertise, which was fantastic. And the risk out of the gate, and actually serious props to our legal counsel who kept us from doing the immediate thing, which was to, so then Tom Knox, who was like, do not take that contract with Booz Allen to go right back into the fort. So we almost did that, and that would have been a company killer for us. And I think you kind of need to make a choice. And in this region, a lot of companies try and do both. They try and do government and some commercial. You kind of got to pick one or the other. And I think just the force of the opportunity and the fact that you have a lot of people coming out of government, it's a great business. It's just a very different business. I would also say that, from the reason why we stayed, and as part of our Series A round, there were some, A+ investors who were excited to invest, but we would have had to move out to the Valley. And we turned those offers down because we were committed to the Washington area. And a lot of it does go back to mission. So we have had to be selective and get UX expertise and product management expertise elsewhere in the country. But we have incredibly high retention here because we were able to hire people who actually care about the privacy mission, but just it's a different mindset. You don't have people bouncing from company to company. When things get tough, they have their first chunk of equity vesting, and they kind of move on from there. Here, people are willing to kind of battle through those tough times. So I think there's a lot to be said for this region. I think that you are exactly right. We are still early days, but it's exciting.
Rohit, how's your journey been through multiple companies, including the one you're building?
Yeah, so I'll just caveat the whole thing with, I can speak to the region, but I personally don't live here. So while we're headquartered in Leesburg, Virginia, I live in Manhattan in New York just because I'm an urban bug myself. So I'll caveat, that's the overarching caveat here. I think there's a couple of things to the points just made. The employee-based mindset is very different here compared to Silicon Valley, and there's pros and cons. Pros are, it's not just a jump ship every 9 months based on who gave me 5,000 extra options, things of that sort. It's a different mindset in Silicon Valley, but there's also the downside of folks out there, what I find, are just used to those sorts of environments, the faster pace of development, the pressures of the business to get product out quicker. And to Jack's point, I think while there's great security talent in the region, given the three-lettered agencies and the other folks that have been working at defense contractors and whatnot, it is a challenge finding software development talent here compared to Silicon Valley or other parts of the country. And I think there's some work to be done there because you have to think about, a lot of the software developers today are the millennial population, and I don't know if the region's doing enough to appeal to them as a home base just as yet. I think, setting up more quasi-urban environments, I know there's a lot of town centers popping up, much like replicating the Reston Town Center, Tysons and so on, I think will go a long way. Improve public transportation, that's one of the challenges. People, you find developers, they're out in New York, they're in Boston, they're in San Francisco, they're used to a certain urban lifestyle, which is hard to translate and get them to leave and move here, even if you can maybe sell them that there's some benefit to cost of living, maybe not, but sort of. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges, is being able to find development and product talent in the region. Security talent, there's no dearth of.
Tiffany, what's your experience been? And you guys all brought up the distributed workforce, which I should have hit in my opening question on it. Can you speak to critical mass, pros, cons here, and how you think about your distributed workforce?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're at about 125 employees as a company right now. And despite being relatively small, right, we've got 6 offices around the globe, 2 of which are the result of small acquisitions that we did out of Detroit and Stockholm, Sweden. But we have a UK presence, primarily sales and support. We've got, we're headquartered in San Francisco, technically, but our largest office is here in Arlington, as well as the majority of our executive team.
That CEO thing.
Yeah, the majority of our executive team is here, and then a space in Raleigh as well, which is kind of where actually the founders started out. So it's really interesting, creates interesting dynamics. I think the co-founders have done a tremendous job of instilling an amazing culture, with core values that everybody knows and understands, and it's felt throughout the organization despite different geographies. That all said, the costs associated with managing that many locations is very high. And so we're actually looking at, how maybe we rationalize that over time. And as we have natural attrition in some places, we really kind of continue to build a larger foundation, of talent here in this area, and San Francisco really is our 2 primary locations.
And hopefully, to Jack's point, as you go through that, you have the resources of the region working together.
That's right.
To help you guys continue to grow. All right, I'm going to get a little rapid fire here in the next couple questions, just because, again, I'm afraid of Taryn, and if I don't stay on time, I get in trouble. What worries you the most right now? And if I could, just run it down, and then we'll run back up on the next one. John.
So then Tiffany mentioned culture, and I think as we are scaling, making sure that we maintain our culture going forward is really important.
Random 140 character tweets.
Would that be from a particular tweeter, or is it just a general comment about Twitter?
I'll
I'm
leave that
joking.
to everyone's speculation, but yeah, the fact of the matter is, I guess jokes aside, I kind of look at the macroeconomics in cybersecurity and the way that's played out. Well, of course, the stock market's gone up in general over the years. It's been one of the greatest bull runs, and as we all know, that's sort of trickled down into venture capital and private equity, making just ridiculous amounts of money being thrown into cybersecurity. I think more so than is probably needed. When I go to the RSA conference and see 1,600 vendors there, I'm like, it's not quite making sense. If you take the 4 buzzwords in cybersecurity between AI, big data, so on and so forth, everyone's got one of those at least on their booth up there. And it is a little scary, but at the same time, it's really fueled the innovation in the industry. And my concern is that, if the macroeconomics turn, how that starts playing into the ecosystem and hurts not just the ones that are not performers, but the performing companies as well. Because it's just taken as a whole, cybersecurity as a whole could have its issues.
I am thrilled to have a fellow bear up on the panel. Jack, what worries you?
So I think that the digital transformation has gotten out in front of security again. And I think that there's a gap, what we're calling a cyber exposure gap, between the way people run their businesses now. Every business now is relying on technology. And I don't think that the executives and the boards are taking it as seriously as it is. It is a core strategic value to running the business. And I think that what concerns me is not moving that pace fast enough of understanding that.
Roger that. Tiffany?
As a relatively new CEO at Distil, it's about maintaining top talent and really kind of, seeing the evolution through to execution and scale, right? Real growth. This next year is a really important year for this company in kind of demonstrating through that transition period. And so, that's what I think about day in, day out.
Roger that. You were talking about your Series C extension, so I'm going to start with Rohit, and again, we're going to do rapid fire. When you think about how to properly fund a company through its various stages of growth, equity, debt, customers, cash flow, otherwise, quick advice and counsel you'd give folks, and then again, go to Jack, Tiffany, and back to you, John.
Yeah, I'll start with don't be in a rush to raise. A lot of founders get excited with the availability of capital and just jump at it. From personal experience, what Aaron and my co-founder, that is, and I did in the early days was we bootstrapped, and sort of like, as Jack said, you sell as long as you can. We did everything as long as we could till we were breaking down and said, okay, now that we've brought in X million in sales, and we go out to raise, it's a different game. You dilute less and you give up less control, all those good things. So we really pushed the envelope on our A, B, and C raises a little beyond what a typical startup would do. I like to believe that served us well over the years, with still a common stockholder base controlling the company in terms of stake. So yeah, I would just say, don't rush to raise. To your point, a second thing I'll say in terms of equity capital is in its vanilla form is not the only form of capital out there. And especially as companies mature and have a path to profitability and so on, I think debt capital becomes increasingly a more viable option as you can see the company turning the corner on cash flow positivity and being able to support the payments and on debt. It is still quite cheap out there in terms of where interest rates are and obviously non-dilutive in nature. So it's a constant balancing act.
Jack, Tiffany? Yeah, if you want to hit any other highlights, otherwise we can rip into the next one.
We bootstrapped for 10 years, so I hold that I tell every entrepreneur, get as far from zero as you can before you start to engage the funding side. It teaches you so much, so I'd say that. Yeah,
and I think for us, in what I'm stepping into, the company had some amazing growth in 2015 into 16 and thought, oh, now's our time. Raised a bunch, burned through it and grew very fast and quickly. And, I think there's something to be said for, being very thoughtful about your resourcing and not, growing too fast, making sure you're really, you're really confident, right, in your plan and your resourcing and allocation, how you're spending that money, so that you can, do the best possible job, right, for all your shareholders.
What is that, John?
Yes, well, I wish that I could throw bombs here and disagree and say, no, definitely raise more when you can. But the real answer, I think, is exactly what the panel just said, which is, at least for us, my take on it is keep a laser focus on the common shareholder, because it's not just about the founders, it's about the employees, it's about retention. And so what we did is, we were fortunate in that we were able to negotiate so then a convertible debt round with a super high cap, and we were just very patient to bootstrap for, I think, a bit too long for our wives, but for as long as we could, and then just really incrementally raise into that note as we were meeting our product milestones, when we were still trying to figure out whether this technology would actually work. And then at that point, if you are going to take institutional Southern Capital, I think make sure that it's a really clean structure, and make darn sure that you aren't just looking at a brand name firm, but that you're really focused on the individual partner involved, because you better be aligned with that person about where you want to take the business. And finally, the naming the bank, because they are not a sponsor here, but we have found that actually debt capital has been fantastic, and we have had a great relationship with our bankers around also being thoughtful about giving us more flexibility.
I second that.
Roger that. I know the Zenith Union guys are out there smiling. I saw them earlier. All right, we got to get 2 more questions in real quick, or I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. So rapid fire these. Going to start with you, Jack, and then go in the order. When you're done with this, when Tenable is sold, public, gone, whatever, what do you hope that people think of your company and yourselves as leaders?
That we tackled a very hard problem from a very trustworthy position, and that we made an impact.
Tiffany.
That the end goal isn't a transaction, that the company continues to live on in whatever form or shape, continuing to do the mission for our customers.
John.
So that Virtru, in fact, actually gave people and companies control of their data online.
Rohit.
Yeah, if I'm ever done with this, I think I just want people walking away saying they want to work with me again.
Awesome. I'd like to get in line on that one. Tiffany, you're going to bring us home, and again, we'll run down the panel. If you could offer any advice and counsel to the existing or aspiring entrepreneurs in the crowd, or folks that they know, or even the children of the people who are in the crowd, and I've got 3, so I'm going to take this home, what would be the single best advice and counsel you could give to a fellow entrepreneur?
Well, I don't, because I'm not one of the co-founders on the stage, right? I bring a different kind of talent set. I'm not the person that's going to be like thinking the grandiose like idea, right? I know that about me in terms of like, look, I'm not the one who's going to bring forward the technical idea or the product idea, but I'm the one who's going to help them get it to market, right? And really establish their presence and be successful in the execution of the go-to-market piece. So I say that because recognize what your skill is, recognize what your talent is, what your strengths are, and where your weaknesses are, right? And make sure you get other colleagues and friends or business partners that can help fill in the gaps.
John.
So I think it's, before diving in, be super clear-eyed about whether the problem that you are trying to tackle is a massive societal problem, a very big problem, and that you have a beeline on having a really differentiated approach, because it's 5x as hard and it takes 3x as long as you will expect. And when you are in the fight, it's an incredible experience, but persistence is the most important quality. So do you have the persistence to kind of take a look at the hard times as actual opportunities, because that is the most important factor for success.
Right.
Yeah, I guess if I was in the position of giving advice to my 18-year-old self, is what I'm thinking here. Is I would say, grow 3 layers of skin. Don't get disillusioned by the naysayers. There's a lot of them that you'll run into over time. And the second piece of advice I'd say is, I've definitely learned sleep is not necessary for survival.
Benjamin Franklin and you agree.
Yeah, and I don't mean in the sense of partying late at night.
Jack, bring us home.
So I would say a couple things. One, develop and curate your mentors. I think over time, as you go through different phases, it's just a wonderful place to lean. These people end up becoming on your board, but they get you through some really rough times. I would also say, really have a strong conviction in your point of view about what you're doing, but be flexible because the world changes, and I think you got to be able to be adaptable to what's going on out there. So.
Well, I'll end it with this. I think you see 4 folks who are going to be mentors. I know many of them are now either on or assisting with companies that are growing in addition to the great ones they have. But I hope you will keep an eye on each of the 4 of them and the companies they run and the continued success they have in this region. Jack alluded to some stats around the number of companies. When you look at the number of cyber professionals, this region stands out even higher in the world. And I like his startup mentality that we should stay lean and hungry and continue to build this area out. Thank you each for taking the time to do it, and continued success to you and your teams.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody.